Hi there, and welcome back to part 3 of our exclusive first look at the Dune Awakening beta. If you haven't seen part 1 and 2, which covered the intro and the first few hours on Arrakis, make sure to check them out. So yes, we have had the opportunity to play Dune Awakening's beta. Actually, we have played it for quite some time already, but like everyone else, we have not been able to share any opinions nor our involvement, but we are excited to do so now. While we aren't permitted to record our own gameplay just yet, we got some exclusive footage to show you. By the way, all the footage is from the beta as of right now, so you will see the latest state of development and can get a good idea of what it feels like to play the closed beta. In part 3 of our beta impressions, we take a look at what the game defines as dungeon equivalents in Dune Awakening, shipwrecks and testing stations. So dungeons, well, Dune doesn't really have anything like traditional dungeons, but what we're offered here is rather something akin to special points of interest. Both shipwrecks and testing stations are not instanced and don't offer any special boss fights or the like. Instead, they are repeatable locations with special loot and more or less challenging enemies, depending on where on the map you are. After playing for around 2 hours, our main journey quest and a few side quests, or contracts as they're called in Dune, are leading us to travel to a shipwreck. Being pretty large, shipwrecks stand out from the environment, although some can be hidden as well, depending on where they're located, and once discovered, they are distinctly marked on the map. This first wreck is not too much of a challenge, as it's within the game's starter zone, often referred to as Hagabassin South, and serves more as an introduction to this type of location. Unlike the footage shown here, we didn't encounter NPCs outside nor in the entrance area to the crashed ship during our last playthrough. You might have caught our earlier reference of not being instanced, meaning these locations are shared. They are easily accessible in the world, so in our case, someone had clearly just been here and killed some of the NPCs that guard the entrance. Venturing inside, we come across a closed door, which we can open using our mining laser, the cutter ray. And in that room we find a large chest with loot. You'll learn that shipwrecks are key to getting microflora fiber and mechanical parts for crafting and progression. To that extent, the game's tooltip even highlights those two resources being found in shipwrecks when hovering over its icon on the map. We found that exclusive or semi-exclusive resources are typical for several areas in the game. Moving further in, we find more loot and encounter some NPCs. Thankfully, as we are efficient in both ranged and melee combat, on top of being experts in applying healing kits, we reach the end without a hitch. Usually, the whole experience only takes a few minutes, and while that is short, keep in mind that these locations are not proper dungeons and rather places where you go repeatedly for specific resources and unique schematics. Even so, we do recall it giving us a vibe of great danger the first time around, and we quite enjoyed the darker atmosphere and the interior design of these ships. Now, this first shipwreck is special in another way, and that's because it is a PvE area and everyone gets loot. Later shipwrecks are actually all PvP areas, which also means loot is not shared. That clearly changes things quite a bit, But since we are only allowed to talk about the beginner experience and very first few hours in game, we can't go into more details. Before we move on, yes, there typically is a final reward chest in Shipwrecks as well as in the next type of location we'll cover, testing stations. Those chests often give special resources and a unique item schematic depending on the location's loot pool. This can be anything from a unique weapon, armor piece to a vehicle part and similar. Now let's talk about testing stations, often also referred to as ecolabs. After chilling out a bit, delivering some contracts and having a break sorting out some crafting and refining some ore, it was time to visit the Desert Botanical Testing Station number 2, also located in the starting sector. Testing stations are more extensive points of interest, and in the case of this first one, it takes you far below ground. You will often have to find identification bands to enter a station and to access special areas within that are otherwise locked off. The majority of testing stations can be soloed, but bringing friends like here makes things faster and easier of course, depending how well you're equipped. What we like about these locations is that they can be quite different visually and give you a break from the desert environment. You might even find some more lush vegetation in these labs, which is a rare sight on Arrakis. Holographic projections and recordings you find throughout these stations will also give you glimpses into what happened at these labs, and some of them are really fun to listen to.
Welcome to Desert Botanical Testing Station number 2. I am the station supervisor, Dr. Rommel Greer. The ultimate mission of these stations is to find or engineer botanical species capable of thriving in the extremely arid conditions of Arrakis. A true challenge, as I'm sure any visitor who has traveled through the barren rocks and sand above will agree.
Now, while we have to face numerous enemies here, it's once again possible to enter these locations and find them completely empty. It's not the end of the world, as you still get loot, but you won't get kills and the experience is simply not the same. While it's said that the respawn rate shouldn't be too bad, we generally haven't been that lucky, especially if more players are around. Since there's no real point in waiting, we often found ourselves just doing a quick loot run before leaving. As you can see, there are plenty of smaller loot containers that can be found throughout these locations. And unlike shipwrecks, all testing stations are PvE areas, and everyone gets their own loot when opening containers. You will normally also find water dispensers that allow you to replenish your hydration levels, which is always a relief. One thing we really love is that the devs have implemented some fun stuff like secret rooms that are hidden behind an interactive bookshelf or wall. It's these little details that often elevate this type of experience, so we'd like to see more like that. Testing stations are often also a destination for contracts. These side quests might ask you to find items here, kill some enemies and similar.
Beneath the hill where the fox runs lightly, a dappled sun shines brightly. Where the fox runs lightly, you can't hide from me, little bird. Where are you?
As you can see here, our character is using some emotes to communicate. We personally haven't used them too much yet, as we find the menu and how to access them quite cumbersome. Again, it feels very controller focused, so yeah, maybe we simply need to get used to it, but our initial impression was that it's a bit awkward. If you make it till the end of a testing station, you'll usually find a sort of mini-boss in one of the last rooms. They aren't comparable to mini-bosses in a traditional dungeon though, but they are slightly more challenging. And then there's the big loot chest that awaits. And as with the ones in Shipwrecks, it's here that you can find some more valuable items and unique schematics. There are various schematics that can be found, but they can typically only be used to craft a unique item once. So that's the main reason you want to come back here repeatedly, plus the special resources of course. So what do you think about what's on offer here? To be honest, as points of interest within the starter area, these locations are perfectly fine. They ease you into more of the combat encounters, teach you where and how to get special loot, offer some lore tidbits, and are generally a nice change of scenery. Again, we can only share our thoughts when it comes to the beginner experience of the beta, and from that perspective, we enjoyed the content that's available. However, we are still not big fans of these places being non-instanced, and we wish they could offer a bit more of a challenge for groups, as maybe scaling in difficulty or similar. If you've seen some of our previous videos where we talk about PvE content in Dune Awakening, based on publicly available information from presentations and interviews, then you know that we feel there needs to be a lot more to hold the interest of PvE players. But this is a topic we'll revisit once we can share more and talk about the content beyond the starter sector. As always, thank you for joining us on our adventures, and if you like what we do, please leave a comment, give us a thumbs up, subscribe or become a member of our channel. Your support makes all the difference.
Sector weather alert. A large sandstorm is approaching.